The President spoke to the nation about the budget. Many will analyze, challenge, and second-guess his proposals, but I won't be among them. Instead, I will try and distill the one-hour speech into several short conversations you could have with your neighbors and friends. Here are the key points I took away from Obama's remarks.
Just like every family in America, the federal government has to do two things at once. It has to live within its means while still investing in the future. If you're a family trying to cut back, you might skip going out to dinner, you might put off a vacation, but you wouldn't want to sacrifice saving for your kid's college education or making key repairs in your house. So you cut back on what you can't afford to focus on what you can't do without. And that's what we've done with this year's budget. What my budget does is to put forward some tough choices, some significant spending cuts, so that by the middle of this decade, our annual spending will match our annual revenues. We will not be adding more to the national debt. We're not going to be running up the credit card anymore. That's important, and that's hard to do, but it's necessary to do, and I think that the American people understand that. At the same time, we're going to be making some key investments in places like education and science and technology, research and development, that the American people understand is required to win the future. So what we've done is we've taken a scalpel to the discretionary budget rather than a machete. Now, you talked about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. The truth is Social Security is not the huge contributor to the deficit that the other two entitlements are. I'm confident we can get Social Security done in the same way that Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill were able to get it done, by parties coming together, making some modest adjustments. I think we can avoid slashing benefits, and I think we can make it stable and stronger for not only this generation, but for the next generation. Medicare and Medicaid are huge problems because health care costs are rising even as the population's getting older. And so what I've said is that I'm prepared to work with Democrats and Republicans to start dealing with that in a serious way. We made a down payment on that with health care reform last year. That's part of what health care reform was about. The projected deficits are going to be about $250 billion lower over the next 10 years than they otherwise would have been because of health care reform. And they'll be $1 trillion lower than they otherwise would have been if we hadn't done health care reform for the following decade. But we're still going to have to do more. So what I've said is that if you look at the history of how these deals get done, typically it's not because there's an Obama plan out there. It's because Democrats and Republicans are both committed to tackling this issue in a serious way. Both in both chambers of Congress, go back and forth and start trying to whittle their differences down until we arrive at something that has an actual chance of passage. And that's my goal. I mean, my goal here is to actually solve the problem. It's not to get a good headline on the first day. My goal is that a year from now or 2 years from now, people look back and say, you know what, we actually started making progress on this issue. When it comes to, over the long term, maintaining tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, when that will mean additional deficits of $1 trillion, if you're serious about deficit reduction, you don't do that. So I do think it's important, as we think about corporate tax reform, as we think about individual tax reform, to try to keep taxes as simple as possible and as low as possible. But we also have to acknowledge that in the same way that families have to pay for what they buy. Well, government has to pay for what it buys. And if we believe that it's important for us to have a strong military, that doesn't come for free. We got to pay for it. If we think that we have to take care of our veterans when they come home, and not just salute on Memorial Day, but we actually have to work with folks who have post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury, well, that requires services that are very labor-intensive and expensive. If we think it's important that our senior citizens continue to enjoy health care in their golden years, that costs money. If we think that after a flood, we help out our neighbors and our fellow citizens, if we're cutting infant formula to poor kids, is that who we are as a people? I mean, we're going to have those debates, particularly if it turns out that making those cuts doesn't really make a big dent in the long-term debt and deficits. Then I think the American people may conclude, let's have a more balanced approach. But that's what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of months. As I said, I know everybody would like to see it get resolved today. It probably will not be.
How would you define a balanced approach to cutting the budget? Well, the White House has created this website, so you can tell them just that. Go ahead and select one of the options, and one of the things you'll notice is not only is it ready to count your vote, but it provides you with some talking points about how the particular issue is included in this budget. I recommend you use these talking points to comment at a website, place a posting on a Facebook page, or include it in a tweet. You can go through each of the various options, and you'll find in each case there are effective talking points you can use to help educate the public about the President's budget. I recommend you review all 5 categories. Then just hit select to have your opinion be counted. Carry President Obama's vision into the lunchroom at work, your dinner table, and the foyer of your church. One simple sentence from you makes a tremendous impact on all who hear it. Folks may argue with you. Maybe you won't be able to remember exactly what the President said, but have no doubt your comment makes a difference. The President can do this. We need to help.